Personalized education is a diverse variety of educational programs that tailor to the student's learning experiences and needs.
I think it depends on the student. Some people learn better when it's hands-on, but like with me, sometimes I learn better with certain subjects if I'm just by myself and teaching myself.
Yeah, somewhat personalized. That goes back to what I said before about the technologies and what do we call it?
You call it like structural.
The technologies and the online learning, the classes that we currently offer. I see that as a way of personalizing more of an education for a student in high school. But the idea still behind high school is to present a student with a range of subjects so that they get an idea of what they want to do and where they want to go once they leave high school. And I think if we start to pinhole students into one particular track, I don't find that as a good thing.
I mean, I definitely think that that is super beneficial to most kids. I think that it has to be done in a way that is going to work for all kids, because not all kids are on a college track. So if you're tailoring a school to be, high level AP style classes, preparing them for college, that's good for those kids. But you also have to think about the other portion of children that maybe are not on that track. Maybe they're on like a vocational track or a military track or a straight to career track, that you have to start giving them those skills to work with.
Do you think there's
I think that's kind of where we're heading now with like the more project-based learning and like Titan 21 night, because in a lot of classes it takes place of the test in that unit, and so it gives like a more broader idea of what they're teaching instead of just giving randomized questions to the student.
Well, because people are different. We live in a society where everybody wants things personalized already. And so I think it's a natural evolution that we would go to personalized education. What's good for one person is not good for another. And cookie cutter models where everything is the same for everyone just are not successful in the long run.
I mean, personally with like Burton, I've been able to, I went to criminal justice for 2 years, and all that could have worked out and helped me in that field. I was also able to realize that's not what I wanted, and now I can learn about medical stuff, and so it's helping me with my future already.
I think not just me, I think it would make everybody want to go to school more, because a lot of people's problems that they have with school is that they don't want to sit behind a desk for 7 hours a day. So I think it would help me personally focus more, because I don't have a very long attention span, so I start zoning out like 10 minutes into class.
And it also sparks interest for everyone, because with the personalized education, everyone's going to be able to study and do what they want to do, therefore making them more excited to come to school every day.
It allows for more student achievements, areas they would not normally be able to tackle or get involved in with a high school environment. You're allowing them the opportunity to really take more action there and see things they wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Well, I think a lot of businesses are coming out and saying that they really want employees that can speak multiple languages. Google has come out and said that it is one of the biggest skills that they're looking for, because we are in a global society at this point. Before, it was more like, oh, if you travel, then you are going to need this language, or if you think you're going to travel for business, you're going to need a different language. But now you can communicate from all over the world just from your office. So being able to have that skill is going to make students marketable, and then it also allows people to be more empathetic in certain situations.
People could be more interested in what they're actually learning, because I know a lot of people hate school because they're not learning what they would want to learn, and they're kind of like forced into like these different math classes or these science classes, but it's not really what they want to do.
They can focus more on what they want to learn and learn in a manner that's better for them, instead of being forced to learn in one way that they can't really understand.
I think we'll continue with the hands-on. I think it'll be more of a hybrid, where there will be classes or times that you have to be in school and meet. A lot of college classes now are hybrid classes where you meet maybe once a week instead of 3 times a week, and then the rest of the work is done online. So I suspect that in my mind and the way I envision it would be more of a hybrid model where there's a combination of both. Because if you don't have the face-to-face, then you miss the socialization and interaction and the richness of the educational experience with that interaction with other people face-to-face.
Well, I think if students are taking classes that they choose, it means that they're taking classes that they're interested in. That's one of the things that I hear a lot that students are excited for in college, is that they get to choose their classes, and they'll be able to take the classes that they're interested in. And so, with personalized education, if students are choosing the classes that they want to take, then they're engaged in their education and they're invested in it, and I think that they take it more seriously, and I think that they're learning things that they're interested in, and at a younger age you can start to think about what it is that you want to do with the rest of your life. So.
I think I'd probably be like, yeah, all right, I'll take this and roll along with it.
I think it would help me because my grades would improve and it would be more beneficial for the career that I want to go into.
Well, personally, I would probably take more personalized like math class, like geared towards logistics and data.
I would probably take art courses having to do with design, because I would take art classes having to do with design because I like creating like different types of architecture, and I feel like having those courses would lead me to a better career choice.
I'd probably take some kind of like science, like maybe like a different physics class, or maybe something biology related.
I'd probably take more like useful class, like there's I would take more class that's dedicated to like teaching how to do taxes or teaching useful stuff in the future, because a lot of people take biology class but they're not going to be a biology major, and so it's kind of contradicting what I want to do and taking away from what would be useful in the future.
Being more motivated as students to want to do better in school. I think
there's too much focus on standardized tests, and some people don't test well, so they aren't seen as smart when they are very smart. And that you can't always just study and know stuff. Sometimes you have to show that you actually know it instead of just memorizing it for the test date.
As far as when I went to school, what would I have liked to see done? Honestly, I can tell you when I went to school, it was set up in a way that, for me, was a very structured learning environment. A zillion years ago when I was in school, we didn't have technology. Nobody had cell phones. We had computer labs in school, but they didn't do what our computers do today. I went to school to learn how to program in computers and not to use the web to research things. For the technologies we had at the time, I think school was structured in a very productive educational environment.
More outside opportunities for involvement, allow students to get more involved with real world situations and let them, like, instead of just doing tests, more like internships and stuff like that.
I was fortunate because I didn't go to school when there was a time of so many standardized tests. If I had something to change with how school is now, I would go back to having fewer standardized tests because teachers were actually able to do more and be more creative in the classroom because they weren't having to focus on getting this long list of skills or this long list of information in, and then people weren't so worried about, is this going to be on the test, or since this isn't on the test, I don't need to learn it.
Standardized tests, because they don't apply what we actually know. You just have to memorize. I think students should have to come up with like an end of the year project that like wraps in everything that they learned that year and not have the teachers teach like towards the test.
The time school starts, because it starts really early, and I think for some kids that it's kind of a detriment because they're not able to get as much sleep as they should be. I'd say around 9 or 10 o'clock-ish.
Probably the amount of times that we're on our laptops, and that's only because I'm one of those learners who has to have physical paper and pencil to learn and to focus. So I get so distracted by laptops, and I'll be doing something, but then I'll just be staring at a screen.
I had a pretty good education. I was on the front end when I was in high school. They had just introduced the concept or the idea of SOLs. So we were sort of the guinea pigs. I think my junior or senior year I may have actually taken one, but it didn't count. It was just sort of a practice thing. So the bulk of my education was not based on SOLs. It was based on individual teachers in the classes. And so I felt like a lot of our teachers had a lot more freedom than probably you guys. Grew up being a generation that, you guys have had SOL since second grade, I guess. So, it's been different. I think one of the things that we've lost is maybe the freedom to explore some different projects and some different things. And, the good news is I think that trend is kind of going back the other way. And, teachers are feeling more comfortable about taking time to do some projects and jump into some different things and really give you guys the opportunity to think critically and not worry so much about SOL testing.
Schedule itself based on the way we the way we do our classes now. I think Hidden Valley High School has been great in starting to involve students more in the determination of how we're going to learn about certain subjects through our PBL projects in the classroom, and you working together and creating together and using critical thinking and collaborating on projects. So I think we're trying to use creativity within the structure we have, which is still 25 students to the same class with the same teacher, having to reach the same goals pretty much at the same time. So we don't have enough staff nor the technology available to completely individualize it. So we have the traditional structure, but our teachers have just been wonderful about trying to individualize it within that traditional structure.
Well, one thing I see is they are the.
Can you put that?
Can you put that for me, please? Well, one thing is I look at the Oak Grove project that's up and coming. They're talking about a 20-year project where they are actually asking us to get our math classes involved, if at all possible, with the development of this 20-year project through through the Roanoke County Public Works and the Roanoke City. The project that they're doing together up at Oak Grove, they're asking us, like I said, to get our math classes involved, which I think is wonderful because it shows our students a practical application for some of the things we do and hopefully helps spark some interest in some of our students as far as this is something I could be interested in long term, which can never hurt our math program. I can't really state or can't think of one particular item, but just in general, involvement in outside communities so that our kids get a actual glimpse of what mathematics is like in the real world compared to what the textbook things that we do. Some classes have to be driven like that. Algebra 1, geometry, things where you need a basic understanding in order to be able to move up to a higher level. So a lot of those things need, in my opinion, more book foundation stuff. But once you have those basic concepts, then expanding them and seeing how they actually work in a real life setting would be extremely helpful.
Honestly, the thing that I think would be the most beneficial for students would be if they could start learning another language at an earlier age. Waiting until you're 13 or 14 years old is probably the most difficult time to try to learn a new language. So if it's something that you start when you're 5 or 6 and then you're able to carry your way through with it, one, you're going to learn so much more. You're going to learn more vocabulary and just using the language in a practical way, and you won't be so intimidated by different sounds that you don't think that you can make.
I definitely think if we personalized it or we could tailor it a little bit more, that maybe we would have more kids that go on to further their education in history, because it is sort of a dying subject area. There's not a lot of kids that are like, hey, I want to go to school and be a history teacher or a museum curator or something like that. So maybe it would kind of generate more interest in the social studies field.
I think there's going to have to be room for that. So, I think if we look at moving towards personalized education and that being a different model, then we're going to have to look at scheduling under a different model. So I think that, with options for online learning or internships and things like that, that the courses of the course times and the time required at school is going to have to change to meet that accommodation.
it is cost prohibitive. So we see less and less money coming to the schools. The budget every year is always very, very difficult because we're trying to decide, okay, there's less money, where do you cut? And the school systems do that, but not only the school systems, the states have to do that. They're getting less money. So they're, they tend to start cutting in their state sector with government jobs or in education when they need to look for where they're going to cut for money. So as far as administrative change, I think what would be good is if from the top down there was a focus which was accompanied with funding to provide the needed change, where we would have the technology that would make it available for students to actually have personalized learning. It would take more than what we have. It's not just being on a computer. It's looking for new and innovative programs. So you have to buy the programs, you have to test them, you have to check out to see if they're reliable ways of introducing the concept. So there's a lot of that would have to go on before you could actually find something that could produce a true individualized learning system for each student.
Well, just to kind of echo like what I said before. I mean, I think as long as like we as a school or as administrators, we're doing everything we can to offer the classes that students want to take. I think we're doing the right thing. So that may include that may include a teacher that may travel between a couple schools. Just because if we have 20 students that want to take one class, even though it's only 20 students, the easy thing would be to say, oh, well, we don't have enough, interest in that class this year, we're not going to offer it. The more difficult thing would be, okay, well, let's figure out how we can make this work. And even if that means maybe having a teacher travel between two schools to come over here and teach that one class and then go to another high school to teach that class somewhere else, I think we need to be willing to do it. So I think for us as administrators, as long as we're willing to do everything we can to, within reason to make it work, then that's what we want to do.
This is kind of
I think having both private and public funding, as from the state and the federal governments, as well as from some private companies, to help fund the school, that cannot be a bad thing. Getting more money into education cannot be a bad thing. The problem is when you start to work with the private sector, it becomes, are we educating students to move on to do what they want to do, or are we educating students to work for a specific company or in a particular field? I think with a certain system of checks and balances, private money in school would be fantastic, because the business world does tell us where we need to change our curriculum and where we should be gearing our education to students. But too much involvement can become a bad thing for education.
I think there should be a combination, because most schools get their money from the state government and local government. Very little actually comes from the federal government. And then with the quantity of reductions that we have gotten as far as funding goes over the past several years, that you need to make that up somewhere. So partnering with companies, especially partnering with companies that are in the community that the schools are in, would be beneficial to everybody in the community.
There's definitely an accountability problem when you involve private funding. You'd have like a lot more to handle, but if it can be done in a way that like educational quality is not like detracted from, I think I would support it, but it's a tricky thing to do.
Wonderful partnership. There are some programs I know of, and I apologize for going back and talking about computer science and technology and technical ed, but that's a real passion for me. But there's programs now where software companies are working with high schools and taking their students in as interns during their senior year. And then they're working with the business, but they're also learning a trade. And then they're continuing that internship while they're in college. So, and then they have a job waiting at the end. So that can be something very beneficial if we're partnering with companies to actually provide opportunities for our students and to be apprentices or to be interns with those businesses. You get a better understanding of maybe, am I cut out for this job? Is this really something I want to do? And this what I want to study in college? And you get to experience more things at the high school level before you get into college, and it costs you an extra $30,000 in 2 more years when you change majors because what you first went into wasn't exactly what you wanted to do after all.
I don't think that that's a risk for the school. I think it's necessary if we want to get into having internships and having partnerships with businesses in the community so that we can keep students in the area. I think that that would not necessarily be a bad idea. Certainly they would have to meet the qualifications for teacher training and things like that, but having people come in as who have the work experience, who could teach a class or do an adjunct with the existing staff would be probably a good idea.
You know, I would definitely like to see more public funding, government funding, you know, for education. You know, in my opinion, I think education is one of the most important jobs there is, just because we're responsible for educating you guys, and then obviously, you know, in 10 years, you'll be the ones that are working and paying taxes and then taking care of us when we're old. And, you know, so to me, that's probably the most important thing that we can do. So obviously that goes hand in hand with funding. I think, you know, we need to be responsible with our money, but I think sometimes there's things that we could use that we don't necessarily have the funding for. I'm a little leery about private funding. You know, the last thing I would want is for you guys to walk into, you know, Coca-Cola High School or you know, something like that. So, I mean, anytime there's private funding, you know, you'd want to be careful to make sure that it wasn't tied to, you know, different stipulations that, you know, okay, well, we're willing to give you a certain amount of money, but you're only allowed to eat this kind of food or drink this kind of drink or something like that. So, I mean, typically I think that we have, you know, we're fortunate enough to live in a country where we do have enough money. I think sometimes it's just a priority, and I like to see that public priority shift a little more towards the education side, and I think that would probably take care of most of the needs.
In a very different direction than I think I would have said 10 or 15 years ago, because we have had such an explosion with technology and project-based learning that it is so different than when I went to high school. So I think obviously we're heading in a great direction, a very new direction, but probably to places that we don't even know exist yet. You know, that we're going to have all new ideas, careers, all that stuff in the very near future.
Is heading towards more use of technology.
I hope it targets more individualized learning, because you can sit everybody down in a classroom and give them a test, but it doesn't necessarily test how much they know. It just tests how well they can take it.
I think the future of education is going to be a lot more online learning than what we currently have in our system. I just feel like with the trends of society and the modern technologies that we have and the priority that those things are, that the priorities that are being placed on teaching of technologies, that online education is going to become something much more available and much more used in school.
Personalized education education and proper funding can become valuable resources if utilized correctly. Together, they can provide an engaging school environment which students will be invested in and are willing to attend. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you are able to see new sides of funding and personalized education.